Cherringham, Episode 34, The Secret of Brimley Manor, written by Matthew Costello and Neil Richards, narrated by Neil Dudgeon.
Chapter 1. The Nightshift. Charlie Barrow got up from the simple wooden chair inside the small stone room, once an old coal cellar, he imagined. Now, though, it was a place to pass the hours between his nightly walks through Brimley Manor. The room, dank and humid in summer like it was now, but damp and chilly in the autumn and winter. Even with a portable heater, it was almost unbearable in January or February. Unbearable, that is, if Charlie hadn't had his own little supply of personal antifreeze. Not too much, he knew, just a little nip here and there. Harder for Clifford, the gardener come daytime custodian, a considerably older fellow who, with kids often mucking about in the property, probably couldn't hide away in here and have a dram of famous grouse now and then. No, this night shift suited Charlie, and the fact that he had to be up all night, not a problem at all. He could sleep while the wife was up, freed from her incessant chatter and the endless chores she was always discovering, or more likely creating for him, in their little cottage on the other side of Cherringham. The cottage, not much of a place, but like this job, perfect for him. Charlie grabbed his torch, a large silver item packed with 4 hefty batteries. Tight in his hand, it looked more like a lethal truncheon. The light cast a bright, strong beam. He slipped his small silver flask into his pocket, always aware of how many sips he had taken. Needed to make it last till dawn. Have that last blissful drop as the sun came up. That is, if it wasn't overcast. The weather was so mixed up lately that sometimes there was no sun to be seen while Charlie waited for Clifford to appear. The old fella, bleary-eyed from just waking up, paper cup of coffee in his hand as Charlie tipped an invisible hat and sailed off to his cottage. Bit of a hike away, on the edge of Cherringham, but again that also suited Charlie just fine. Leaving the car there meant the wife could go off and busy herself with an errand of some sort. Plants. That was her latest thing, as if the bloody cottage wasn't totally surrounded with all that God deemed fit to grow in this lovely corner of the world. Never enough for my Edna, he thought. Charlie quickly slipped his phone into his pocket. No walkie-talkie needed here since, well, the old Brimley Manor house was his purview alone. My purview, he said, liking the sound of the word. The meaning, he guessed, would stump anyone from the current dimwit generation with their Facebooking and Twitter this, Insta that. Bollocks, all of it, he said aloud. He enjoyed the company and comfort provided by his own words, and then, all ready, he marched up the 3 stone steps from the small pseudo-guardhouse and out into the humid night air. Charlie certainly didn't hurry as he made his way through what had been, back in the manor house's prime, some sort of a sunken garden. Now it was just another neglected and overgrown spot. These days, more pressing areas received the attention of the overworked Clifford and that young lad that helped him. Those two barely able to keep the grounds from looking like a dump. And he had to marvel, imagine, this place managed by the mighty Conservation Trust. Managed, he said, his voice low, muttering. If this is bloody managing, no wonder the whole country's going to hell in a handcart. More steps. Handcart. Now just what is that, Charlie thought. Some kind of wheelbarrow? More steps rose up from the sunken flat area of weeds and dead flowers to the gravel path that led to the manor house. It was dark, save for a few lights outside that barely outlined the hulking shape of the big house and the other outbuildings. No impressive sound and light show taking place here nightly, he thought. Not like some of the Trust's properties in the area. Oh, no. Brimley Manor. Way down the spending list for years. As he reached the top of the steps, he turned and looked left to the small farmhouse, part of the estate, just a couple of minutes' walk down the roadway that led from the east end of the building. That house probably no larger than Charlie's own modest cottage, but where, apparently, the lone surviving heir of the Brimley fortunes lived. The Honourable Peregrine Brimley. Honourable? That was a bit of a moot point. Not that Charlie had ever seen him. That cottage must have been, he thought, part of the deal for letting the Conservation Trust take over the manor house and run it as... what? A museum? Some place of historical value? Charlie shook his head at the thought. It was hardly either one of those. Another glance down the roadway to the small farmhouse. A few warm yellow lights on. That house attached to some fields, a vegetable patch, a couple of pigs, a chicken coop. Not much of a farm to speak of, but apparently the Brimley heir was able to get by, selling whatever he grew to the local shops and restaurants. Charlie, having seen about every inch of the manor house, often wondered just what kind of nutter was Peregrine Brimley. Was said offspring, grandchild, or whatever, as off his rocker as the original Brimley? Well, as long as Charlie's duties were confined to night time, he doubted he'd ever get the chance to find out. Charlie turned his attention back to the house looming above him in the darkness, the walls thick with ancient ivy. Up ahead, a flight of broad stone stairs. The stone, a traditional Cotswolds yellow, like the manor house itself, leading to massive wooden doors, as if ready to permit entry to amazing visitors from important places, the great and the mighty. But why on earth would they ever visit this place? A madhouse. That's how Charlie described it to his mates when he met them at the Ploughman's on his one night off a week. Stuff in there, he'd say. Well, you just wouldn't believe it. And his friends, couple of pints in, all said they should come visit on the one day a month that it was actually open to visitors. Fat chance of that happening. Charlie paused at the top of the stairs and fished out a plastic card, his key that opened those great doors. A small concession to modernity that the cash-strapped trust seemed to have been able to afford. Things were mighty tight these days. Never more so than inside here, Charlie thought. The door popped open. Up to his right was one of the few CCTV cameras recording whoever was about to enter. Every 24 hours the recording erased. No high-tech security system or monitoring taking place here, just a handful of cameras to protect all its treasures. Ha! And then, knowing that as close as the air was out here, inside was going to be even worse, he entered Brimley Manor. Chapter 2. Something in the Air. Once inside, Charlie knew that he'd better look dutiful as he shut the door behind him tight and slipped on the light of his massive torch. No house lights on, those were the rules. Dodgy wiring at night, too much of a risk, he guessed. Look sharp now, he thought. You're being recorded. He knew that above him sat another CCTV camera designed to catch anyone upon entering, but now it was seeing only Charlie off to begin his nightly rounds. 3 times a night, same drill. Why 3 times? Wouldn't one check in the dead of night suffice? Still, they were paying for his services, so why complain? Not that it was such a princely sum. The funds allotted to his salary were at the same measly level.